Hello, everyone. Today, I'm excited to share our recent work about animatable single-image human reconstruction. The paper has been accepted for publication in the Conference on Computer Vision and Pattern Recognition in 2025. Single-image 3D human reconstruction is an emerging modeling technique that aims to create a lifelike 3D avatar from just one image, offering a highly cost-effective and promising approach to 3D modeling. Recently, 3D Gaussian splatting has made significant breakthroughs in rendering efficiency and quality, establishing itself as a mainstream approach for 3D avatar reconstruction. However, current 3D GS-based methods for single-image human 3D avatar reconstruction suffer from critical limitations in animation, as most are designed primarily for static assets. This paper aims to develop an animation reconstruction framework that achieves a high balance between efficiency and rendering quality. Achieving animatable single-image human reconstruction is particularly challenging for two main reasons. First, incomplete observation. A single image lacks comprehensive viewpoint information, offering an extremely limited partial observation that cannot address occlusion issues. Secondly, inconsistent 3D priors. Current mainstream methods use score distillation sampling to leverage diffusion models as supervisory modules for learning 3D priors. However, the high generative diversity of these models often leads to viewpoint inconsistencies, resulting in implausible imagery. To address these challenges, this paper introduces a novel single-image three-dimensional human avatar reconstruction framework, named SynGS. At the core of our SynGS framework are two key components: kinematic human diffusion and a highly geometry-preserving three-dimensional Gaussian splatting. Kinematic human diffusion is designed to sample a highly 3D consistent human sequence within the pose space, based solely on a single input image prompt. To train kinematic human diffusion model, we constructed a dataset with over 10,000 rotation videos, allowing the model to learn a rich variety of human structures and texture distributions from different angles, while also gaining extensive knowledge of human kinematics. Unlike existing frameworks that rely on costly and scarce multi-view human data, our approach requires only more affordable and abundant video data, significantly reducing the training costs and better aligning with scaling laws. Geometry-preserving 3D Gaussian splatting tackles artifact and hole issues under imperfect human priors, such as minor jitter and 3D inconsistencies, through two key designs: the semantic Laplacian regularization and the geometry-preserving density control. Now, let's talk about the kinematic human diffusion module. Kinematic human diffusion samples in human kinematic space rather than directly in camera space, enabling efficient capture of both viewpoints and motion traits. The model doesn't require multi-view data for training, compared with camera sampling methods that in-paint different views of input image. Here are advantages. First, the model is trained using monocular videos, which are easier to obtain than rare multi-view images. Second, the temporal continuity of motion provides an additional constraint that helps enforce identity consistency. Here is the workflow of the kinematic human diffusion. The model takes a single input image IR and, guided by a randomly sampled sequence of poses, P1, P2 to Pn, generate a corresponding sequence of output images, IP1, IP2 to IPN. It inputs the reference image IR and the driving sequence into the UNet. The reference image IR is encoded by the VAE encoder of the diffusion model into a latent code ZRR, serving as an appearance reference throughout the process. Additionally, the reference image is encoded by the CLIP image encoder into features, which are injected into the network through cross-attention. Moreover, 2D poses cannot reliably differentiate between different viewpoints of the human body. Thus, the model uses SMPL as the driving signal. The SMPL parameters are converted into a mesh model in the specified pose using linear blend skinning. This mesh is rendered as an RGB image based on the fixed camera pose maintained throughout the process. The rendered image sequence is then encoded by a 3D pose encoder into a latent code, in which noise is added before being fed into the diffusion model's backbone. Simultaneously, Reference image is processed to estimate and encode its pose latent code, which is also fed into the diffusion model. Once we obtain the sequence of pose images sampled from kinematic human diffusion, the goal is to distill an animatable and real-time rendered human avatar using geometry-preserving 3D Gaussian splatting. As illustrated in the figure, we initialize the positions of Gaussians using the human template mesh that has undergone loop subdivision. The initial positions are set to the vertex locations with a default of 2 upsampling iterations. This typically results in approximately 110.6K Gaussians. To model the avatar representation, all vertices are fed into a learnable triplane to extract vertex-wise features. These features are subsequently passed to MLPS to predict the geometry and appearance attributes of the Gaussians, respectively. The entire modeling process occurs in canonical space, and we finally map this canonical space into posed space using linear blend skinning based on the SMPL framework. We also consider the following 2 strategies to improve the results. Semantic Laplacian regularization addresses floating Gaussian spheres caused by 3D inconsistencies. It adjusts the constraint strength based on body parts, allowing more flexibility for areas like hair and tighter constraints for facial details, reducing floating Gaussian spheres while maintaining rendering quality. Geometry. Preserving density. Control resolves over-deletion and incorrect deletion of spheres in the training process. By managing the Gaussian sphere density via mesh edges, it ensures the spheres remain around the mesh, preserving geometry and preventing large holes. Here is an illustration of the overall framework of our method. Given a reference image and a driving pose sequence, the model generates a corresponding video sequence as output. We compare SynGS with 2 methods from the literature that claim to support animation. We animate their reconstructed outputs to a common pose for comparison, which allows us to evaluate both reconstruction and animation capabilities. The comparison results are shown in the figure. SynGS generates results with better details and maintains high-quality animation, particularly on the in-the-wild data, where SynGS's visual performance significantly outperforms the other methods. This demonstrates the high feasibility and effectiveness of the kinematic prior. KHD, as the core component of our pipeline, is compared with state-of-the-art human image animation methods, including Animate Anyone and Uni-Animate. We drive the same character with all 3 methods, focusing on comparing the quality of their generated results, particularly for the turning pose. From the figure, it is clear that both Uni-Animate and our KHD maintain higher consistency than Animate Anyone after the character turns, with KHD surpassing Uni-Animate in detail. The details marked by the red arrows in the figure reveals that Uni-Animate generates incorrect details, a common issue when using 2D poses, as they often struggle to distinguish body orientation during back-facing poses, leading the model to generate erroneous images. This is detrimental to reconstruction, while KHD generates videos with much higher consistency. To validate the superiority of our geometry-preserving 3D Gaussian splatting over general human modeling methods, we compared it with recent state-of-the-art methods. We generate a pose sequence using KHD and then performed reconstruction with all 3 methods. The reconstruction results are shown in this figure. As seen, both comparing methods fail to produce a compact 3D avatar, with significant holes or floating artifacts appearing in various areas, particularly during the turning motion. In contrast, our geometry-preserving 3D Gaussian splatting method is able to reconstruct a compact, watertight 3D avatar model. We selected 100 test videos from the UBC dataset for a quantitative analysis. For each video, we chose the first frame as the reference image and used the video's pose sequence as the driving signal. The performance of all methods was assessed by comparing the animation results with the original video to evaluate the differences. Video reconstruction metrics, including PSNR, LPIPS, and FVD, reflect the model's animation capabilities, while contextual distance and clip score allow for comparison with methods that do not support animation. The quantitative comparison results are shown in the left table. While SynGS lags behind Uni-Animate, It shows a significant advantage over other methods in some metrics. However, SynGS significantly outperforms diffusion-based animation methods in terms of inference efficiency and resource consumption. Our SynGS achieves 70 FPS during inference, with only 3.8 gigabytes of memory usage, which is tested on a single NVIDIA 4090 GPU, while UniAnimate, Champ, and Animate Anyone each require more than 0.4 seconds per image and consume over 12 gigabytes of memory. These quantitative results strongly demonstrate that SynGS is highly effective and feasible. We conducted ablation experiments on the two key designs in geometry-preserving 3D Gaussian splatting. The first is semantic Laplacian regularization, and the second is the geometry-preserving density control, with the results shown in the right table. By replacing and removing the Laplacian regularization, we observed that semantic Laplacian consistently outperforms in terms of reconstruction metrics. Additionally, the geometry-preserving density control demonstrates a performance advantage over the original density control strategy. The original strategy does not account for dynamic properties and geometric constraints, which makes it ineffective in addressing issues like floating and holes caused by data inconsistencies. In this paper, we propose a new paradigm for single-image 3D avatar reconstruction. Unlike traditional methods that complete missing information in camera space, we sample in human kinematic space, enabling efficient capture of both viewpoints and motion traits. To achieve this, we introduce kinematic human diffusion for consistent pose space generation, supported by our rotation human dataset, which focuses on turning motions. Additionally, we propose geometry-preserving 3D Gaussian splatting that reconstructs high-quality animatable 3D avatars under imperfect human priors. This includes two key innovations: semantic Laplacian regularization for compact, detailed constraints, and a geometry-preserving density control strategy to maintain stable human geometry. Together, these innovations allow SynGS to achieve high-quality, animatable 3D avatar reconstruction from a single image. Thank you for your attention.